seen you. You know the punishment for breaking the rules.
No, Dad!
You opened the door. You almost got us killed. You have to stay hidden.
Till when?
This is not a game. Did you go outside?
No,
You can never lie to me.
I'm not lying.
You want to know what's in an ice cream truck? Frozen kid bodies.
Come inside. Taste any flavor you want.
Hi, you might have followed me.
Daddy, are you okay? What happened?
You use the term freaks. Any freaks who are running loose are illegal.
You better get away from my house.
I don't want to hide anymore.
Roll.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming a new guest today, and that's Pete Abeyta. Pete, how you doing today?
Hey, Perry, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, too. We were just talking off mic, and even though these episodes are being recorded a few months in advance, I just had a new baby born yesterday, so we're
Yeah, that's exciting.
yeah, it's we got two now. We got a complete set. So people are used to hearing my daughter in the background who listen to the show, and so now they'll be hearing my son too in the background.
A boy and a girl too, a matching set, or I should say, a complete set.
A complete set, yeah. Anyway, before we jump into today's discussion, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I fix cars by day. that's my day job. But I'm a kind of a freak for movies. I watch a ton, and I probably last year I watched about 530 or so movies. And the podcast that I have is with two of my buddies, good close friends, Joseph and Tyler. It's called Middle Class Film Class. It's anywhere you're listening to this show, you can listen to that show, to our show. And what makes our movie show a little different than other podcasts out there is that we record it live to tape, like it's a kind of like a morning talk show sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So there's segments, there's intro music, there's call-in guests. We just recently had the director of Hot Seat call in to the show this past weekend.
Nice.
James Colin Brissack, and it's a lot of fun. We try to keep it funny and entertaining, and every Monday it's a Gab and Chatter. We call it Gab and Chatter. It's like a weekly review or weekly news segments that we all bring to the show. Sometimes we'll do trivia, sometimes we'll just play games, and then we give streaming picks for the listeners from all three of us. And then on Wednesdays it's one deep dive review into whatever movie we feel like watching, chosen at random, and we do a lot of fan interaction and fan picks for that too. So it's a lot of fun. You should check it out if you're into movies, which I'm sure you are.
Yeah, I imagine most people are. So this is specifically about superhero movies. So what kind of history do you have with superhero movies or superheroes in general?
I was never a comic book guy. Like as a kid, I never bought and actually read comic books. All that being said, I'm also not much of a book guy in general. Mm-hmm. I think the last book I read was Fight Club, and I did it for a challenge for the show, which I've since abandoned. I was going to read 12 books this year, and I got into 2, and I started doing Interview with the Vampire and hit a wall, and I was like, this is rough.
Yeah. Anne Rice, I'm not really a big fan. I love the movie, but yeah, I could not get into any of her books.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who said the same thing, and I honestly, the last time I read a full complete novel was probably 15 years ago. So I don't do a lot of whole academic sort of stuff. I work on cars and kind of a meathead in that aspect. But as far as comic books go, the movies, there's such a great broad spectrum of comic books and superhero movies that it's not, I don't want to say it's unfortunate, but what most people look at when they think of a comic book movie is MCU. Sometimes
Right.
the DCEU or whatever as well. But I appreciate those movies. I like where Sony started with it, with the Raimi series of Spider-Man. and I do like some of the earlier Marvel stuff. It's become oversaturated to the point where I just stopped caring as much anymore. So
Mhm.
I just this last week watched Eternals and the new Doctor Strange, and they were good. There were some things that I liked about it, and some things I really just thought the writing was kind of a mess.
Mhm.
And to be for full disclosure, I still haven't seen Infinity War or Endgame, so
So I
that's kind of
imagine you
where
might have been a little bit of lost with at least Doctor Strange with that then.
a little bit. Yeah, I didn't. The only series I've watched on like the Disney Plus extended universe has been The Mandalorian, so it's not
Mhm.
even in the Marvel universe. That's
Right,
just
right.
the only one that I've seen. But I'm if it's a movie that I don't really care about or a series I don't really care about, I don't mind reading full synopses and
Mhm.
spoilers and whatnot. If it's something I'm going to go into and I'm like, ooh, I want to go see the new Robert Eggers movie, the
Right.
Northman. I didn't see a single trailer for that before I went into it, so people are like, oh my gosh, when he catches the spear and throws it back at the guy, that's so cool. And I got to experience that, fresh
Mhm.
with the Marvel stuff. I've read all about WandaVision and how that kind of arc went, and so I was a little bit lost in the Doctor Strange movie, but I was just trying to enjoy a Sam Raimi movie,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
I love him as a director. He's so fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, that's actually a nice transition into what we're talking about today because I mean, I love the Marvel movies.
yeah,
But I also get your points, and also what you said about reading stuff too is that I I'll use this as a comparison point. Is I never read the Lord of the Rings books, and um, back in college and for years, one of my best friends would always tell me, he's like, "Oh, you got to read the books. You got to read the books. You got to." So finally, I bought like the trilogy, and I started, and I took me forever to get through that first book just because I
yeah.
could not get into Tolkien style or whatever. And then not long after that, my buddy rewatched the movies and he came to me. He's like, and then he reread the book and he said to me, he's like, "Yeah, I just reread the book." And he's like, "You know what? You're fine with just the movies. You can skip the books."
I'm giving you a pass.
Yeah, and I feel like you can say the same thing with comics. Like there's just it there. I mean, I love the comics. I do a companion show to this where we review comics, but there is just so much stuff in there, and I can totally get people who find it hard to dive into that. I think you got to be at the right age to kind of let it catch you and have that motivation, just kind of like sit through stuff that you don't understand or just seek out all this stuff. When you get older, it becomes a lot harder to do that stuff.
Yeah, plus there's only so many ways that you can draw your attention. It's like, do I want to dedicate just entire seasons worth of this Marvel extended TV series
Right.
streaming series, or do I want to watch 10 new indie movies?
Mhm.
And that's kind of where my heart lies, honestly, is more in like the obscure sort of dramas and interesting stuff. Like the movie we're going to talk about today is like completely under the radar, ultra low budget, and it's like a really fresh idea that's like, ooh, this is cool.
Mhm.
And I never heard word one about it or anybody do a review about it. And I'm thinking, this is a travesty when you have some content creators that are making these really cool stuff for really low budget. Do you know anything about Jim Cunningham? He's a new filmmaker.
Not really. No, I don't think I've heard. The name sounds kind of familiar.
I'm sorry,
But
Jim Cummings. I'm sorry, not Cunningham.
okay.
He did Wolf of Snow Hollow and Thunder Road and gosh, what was the other one? The Beta Test most recently.
Okay. No, I haven't heard of any of those.
He's just like a guy that just produces stuff and is really a champion of indie film, and he's just like, make cool stuff with your friends, put it on the internet, somebody will notice if it's good, and then you can do bigger stuff for bigger people. And I like that aspect of film. And Joseph is one of the hosts of our show. He works for like a high-end advertising company, so he shoots high-end production, nice cameras, cinema quality cameras. And we always talk about little projects that we're going to do, and we're kind of in the middle of planning our first horror short to shoot together. And it's kind of exciting just because it's like, ooh, I've been watching movies my whole life. I know what I think looks cool. Let's see if we can get it on in front of the lens,
Yeah, having done that in the whole student film thing when I was in university, I definitely it's a really fun experience. I will say that, and you learn a lot about what kind of people in your life you can count on, which ones you can't as well.
Yeah, I'm sure,
especially when you're university age.
Oh yeah, that's It's a lot harder to find reliable people in your 20s.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, and I get all that too. And I'm an indie creator myself. I'm an independent novelist. So
Nice.
I totally understand all that too. And as much as I love the Marvel movies, it is also kind of cool to see something like this that takes the superhero concept and plays with it a little bit. And so what we're talking about now, today is 2018 Freaks, which, speaking about what you said when you said that nobody was even talking about this, I had never even heard of this movie until you suggested it for.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I came into this completely blind, and it was, I really liked it. I really enjoyed what I saw. Yeah. It was like when I read the premise and stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, it seems interesting, but I didn't really know what to expect. I wasn't sure whether or not I'd like it. But I was really impressed with what they did with it, especially with how small scale it was, and how much they were able to do with so little.
Yeah, the really interesting thing I think about the story is that the story's told in a really non-traditional Hollywood way, where the first act, the whole first third of the movie, you're just like, what is going on? There's a energy bubble that happens from time to time, and you're not sure about it, and it's like this inside the house just looks like a meth house, and you're like, is this guy a criminal? Is he abusive to his daughter? He seems like he loves his daughter, and you just don't know about any of it. And they really just give you these little breadcrumbs along the way until you see the full picture, and you're like, one of my biggest pet peeves about like mainstream Hollywood movies is the really clunky exposition. It sticks out, and it's like, oh, there's an exposition dump. It's like two people talking to each other, and it's like, Jim, you're my brother. When our mom died, I promised I'd never leave you. Like, okay, there's got to be a better way to say that. So with this, there's really only like one or two lines of dialogue that are like that in this, and I feel like it's necessary. But to your point though, that the scope is really small, and I read I don't know how true this is, but I read that the writers, it's a writer-director duo, and I read that they did the thing with about $2,000 worth of investment, and the rest of it they just paid with their own money.
Oh, wow.
Which is,
I mean, I believe it, because there's not a whole lot that they really, I mean, imagine that, I totally believe that they had a very small budget on this, because it's not a movie that looks like it really needed a whole, oh, and that's total box office. But speaking of budgetary stuff, it only grossed about $350,000 total.
Yeah. I want to say it was released at the Toronto Film Festival, or maybe it was. I want to say it was because they shot it in
Toronto
Canada.
International Film Festival. And it also got released on iTunes, and it became in December 2019. Yeah, it topped the charts, the best-selling independent film on iTunes.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was released in theater, or not in theaters, at the in the what's it called, the circuit, like Toronto, the film festival circuit in 2018, but it never even made it into theaters until 2019. So
and it was released in September 2019 in US and Canada, and then got VOD and DVD releases in December of that year. And that's how I found it. They had a DVD at the local rental store here.
Oh, cool.
Which I was kind of surprised. I after reading that, I wasn't expecting to be able to find it that easily, but looked it up on their website, and it was.
Where are you located?
I'm in Japan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you could just do Netflix, but
it's
not the same over there.
I thought about that. But yeah, Netflix here. I use a VPN too, but I wasn't quite sure. And it was there. I was at the video store anyway, so I just figured to pick it up. Yeah. But yeah, and one of the things I liked about it too is it really does a great job of making you feel like you're experiencing it along with Chloe, the main character in the movie. Like it's all very much told through her eyes, and so as she learns stuff is when we learn stuff, and I thought that was a really good way of doing it. We don't really get and a lot of stuff is just it's really well executed, and like the way, like you said about her father, we're like not sure if he's abusive, not sure if he really loves her, and all this kind of stuff, and because you get the sense that Chloe's going through those exact same emotions in those moments too.
Yeah, and I think that the writing, I read a lot about the production of this because it seems it's such a cool project, and the two filmmakers, I got to say their names, and they one of them's got a real tough to say last name, Zach Lipovsky.
Mhm.
Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein
Yeah.
are both wrote it and directed it together, and I have to commend like the overall vision because they're the way that they had to shoot this was almost like you need to reveal enough to the audience but not too much, and they shot it, what they said is they shot it like they're making a Pixar movie
Mhm.
where they would just get a ton of coverage. They'd edit a rough version of it. And even before they shot the video, they did a dry run with iPhones in with like just their friends acting out the whole length of the movie, and then edited a rough cut in their house for basically for $0 because they were just using their own stuff. But when it was all done, they edited a rough cut and they spent months doing test screenings for just friends and family. No industry people, just friends and family, and saying, does it make sense here? You know, is the reveal too clunky here? You know, is it too confusing if we do this? And the only two named people that you recognize this, they're Bruce Stern and Emil Hirsch, which are
Well,
both.
also Grace Park too. I'd argue for her.
Grace
as
Park.
well.
I never seen her before.
Oh, she was in Battlestar Galactica, the new one, and she was also in the new Hawaii Five-0, and I think she was also in the Last Jedi. I think she had a small part at the beginning of that. She was
cool.
Rose's. I'm pretty sure she played Rose's sister, who dies at the beginning of that.
Yeah, there's I mean if you look through the actual catalog of most of the actors and actresses, there's most of them are pretty established. The only two people that I'd noticed right off the bat was Dern and Hirsch.
Yeah,
and they crushed it. But the filmmakers said they only had about 3-4 days with each one of them, so they had to shoot their stuff. But they wrote into their contract that they would have 2 days additional pickup days if they needed them to come back. So they're like, we're going to get everything we want and ideally get it in one shot. But the way we're editing this together, we know that there's inherently going to be some additional scenes that they're going to have to do. So I don't know. I thought the whole project was great. And the world that they build in this, this is just one small story in the world. I would love to see an expansion on this.
That's one thing I was thinking about, and I kind of liken it to there's this movie we covered fairly recently on the show called Push from like the aughts with Chris Evans. I'm not sure if you ever saw that.
I actually, what a weird coincidence. I just heard about that movie today.
Oh, okay.
Added it to my list because it's streaming on Hulu, I think.
Yeah, we covered it on the podcast. It was on a fairly recent episode, and it's kind of similar to this in that it gives you this really intriguing world, and it tells you like this one small story in the world. One of the things that, but I think what this movie did better is I think the story is much more rewarding in this movie as opposed to in Push, where it felt like they had this really great world, but they didn't really have a story that really kind of fit as well in it, that really kind of appealed as much as the world building did.
Yeah, wasn't it like a heist ultimately or something?
In a way, kind of. A little bit more complicated than that, but it had some good performances. Like you had Chris Evans and Dakota Fanning in it.
Yeah.
It's worth a watch. It just wasn't as good as the premise made it seem. Like I wanted to see more stories about that world, or at least a better story about that world. Whereas this one, the story is really good in this, and I was captivated from beginning to end. But at the same time, I'm also so curious about seeing more of that world that they're in.
Yeah, they leave it open-ended at the end of the story that there could be something between the mother and the daughter. There could be something between the government and this, like, what do they call it, Modoc Mountain or something like that?
Maddox
Mountain.
Yeah.
And it just seems like it's ripe for a sequel. It would be really cool to see that. And I know that it was,
or even like, I think instead of even like a TV series or something, like a Netflix series or something like that would be, because there's just, because you think about something like Heroes, which had all this. I love the first season, but after that, it just kind of like
that's all I've seen.
Yeah, okay.
They made more seasons.
Yeah, you don't want to watch the rest.
Okay, done.
But that's one of the things. It's like it had so much potential that was just kind of like squandered. And I think something like this, and this is even a more intriguing world than that was. And I think there's so much you could do with that in a TV series.
Yeah, I think if the people who are listening to this right now, I know we really haven't given a whole lot of the plot about this. So, and I think that's probably important. If I really don't want to go into like spoilers about this or like really the big reveal about it, because it is so rewarding to see this relationship between father and daughter, and then the relationship with the father and the old man. And eventually you find out what that really is. And the universe that they live in it feels so lived in. And I like the fact that it gives you just a little bit at a time, because it makes it feel that much more rewarding when you're like, oh, that's what's happening here. Oh, this whole time, like, that's why the house looks like that, and that's why the dad is always tired and blah blah blah. But what was I gonna say? The even though it looks like an indie low budget movie at times, like you see the kind of the connector like almost like a GoPro shot on the side of the ice cream truck. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, but you can tell it's pretty low budget. But for the most part, all of the directing and the performances done by the people, you completely forgive it. And the main girl, she's 7 years old. Her name is Lexi Kolker. Without her, the movie sucks.
Yeah, I was so surprised, because like this entire movie, basically, it rests almost 100% on her shoulders, and they're not very big shoulders, and for her to carry that, the weight of this entire movie on them, and she does it. She really manages to carry it all the way through. I was really impressed by her. I don't think I've been this impressed with a young actress since there's a Korean movie called Phone. I'm not sure. It's the story itself is not that great, but one of the greatest things about it is the little girl who's acts in that movie, and she just kind of like stole the whole show. And I got the same sense from Lexi Kolker in this. Like, she just like you said, without her, this movie does not work. And you have to get, if you had a lesser actress, an actress who wasn't as talented as she is, like, they could not have sold this movie.
Yeah, and I think it's a testament to the filmmakers finding the right person for that. And I read an interview between the two of them, and they basically said that they did have it written for a young girl originally, but they were open to a young boy, or maybe a little bit younger, or maybe a little bit older, as long as they could find the right person. And they said, if we can't find the right person, we're not even going to make the movie. And they did a dozen or so, or I want to say a couple dozen, or close to 30 auditions with young talent, and found the right person, and they knew right away.
And now, I'm not sure if you know about this. But it says here in one of the Hollywood Reporter's review called Kolker's performance semi-improvised. I'm not sure if you know anything about that.
I didn't read a whole lot about the actual like set, like day-to-day stuff, but I do know that they shot most of it during the summer so they could get a full 8 hours with her. And they only had her for, I want to say 2 weeks, because every single shot that her face wasn't in it, they were shooting around her, just because child actors, you got 8 hours and that's it. It's hard out. I don't know about the improvisation. If that's the case, if it's mostly improv, that's even more impressive.
Yeah. I couldn't find anything else about it other than that one reviewer. So I'm not sure if that's just something he picked up on, or if he knew something about it that I can't find verified. But whatever the case, like it's a really impressive performance. Also, Emil Hirsch, like I was watching this movie, and throughout the entire movie, I'm like, I know this guy. I couldn't place him. And then afterwards,
Speed Racer.
And I'm like, yeah, it's Speed Racer. I'm like, holy shit. Which makes me feel like, 10 times older than I am.
I love Speed Racer. That's a guilty pleasure that I'm not guilty about.
It's such an underrated movie. I mean, it's so much better than a lot of people give it credit for.
Yeah, they get that psychotropic, acid flash feel, and they're just like, okay, this stinks, but it's really is greater than the sum of its parts, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, he was amazing in it. I thought he did a really good job, and being a father myself, like I could relate so much to his performance, and like the scene when she tells him, she's like, I hate you and all this kind of stuff. Like I felt that, because I'm just like thinking about, I'm looking at my daughter while Chloe is saying that stuff, and I'm just like, oh, she's gonna say that to me one day, and that's gonna make me sad when she does.
No, it's heartbreaking. All the like emotional like journey that Chloe, the character of Chloe, goes on. It's like unfortunately, the father he's the one who's taking all of the brunt of her punishment.
Mhm.
And I know that he signed up for that and he's ready to sacrifice for his daughter. And he says as much in the movie. But gosh, like, I don't love you. I wish you weren't my dad.
Mhm.
Let me out or I'm going to kill you. You're like, oh my gosh, she's turned into a monster.
Mhm.
And part of it, there is a scene in it where it essentially the ADF agent says, if we find them, but we don't believe that they're born inherently evil. So if we were to find them early and nurture them, they could be such a powerful force on our side.
Mhm.
And in my head, I was thinking, yeah, I guess that's better than just exterminating them. But then when you see the girl going down that path, I'm like, okay, maybe she is evil.
Mhm. Well, yeah, that's one of the things
Or
I
maybe
liked
she's
about
just a
it.
7-year-old. I don't know.
Well, that's what I liked about it is that it's very gray, this movie.
Mhm.
And I'm not talking in terms of like actual color. I mean just like the way they play with those types of ideas. It's not black and white, right? It's not just like there's this evil government agency and this family just trying to make it through, but it's much more complex. Like that scene when they're with and I'm gonna try my hardest not to spoil this because, like you said, I think this is a movie that it really rewards you if you go into it knowing nothing about it.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this right now, you really should just pause this,
Mhm.
go rent it for $3 on Amazon, or if you're in the States, it's streaming on Amazon Prime, Netflix, and I think it's on Canopy and Hulu. It's or not Hulu. What's the one? Tubi.
Tubi, okay.
It's everywhere. So go watch it and finish this later.
Yeah, I will say that. So yeah, fair spoiler warning. Like I'm probably gonna go into spoiler territory here because
Yeah,
it's hard to talk about some of this stuff in here without going into spoilers
Yeah.
because there's a lot of stuff there. But so 3, 2, 1, spoiler warning done. Okay. When they go to that family and she's using her powers on the mother, it's like
Yeah.
it's freaking terrifying.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's just like in a second, she goes from being this cute, sweet little girl to being just like you said, a fucking monster.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a number of moments when you start to reveal who she really is, and there's the scene when the ADF agent is at the front door with the neighbor, and it's weird. It's because the powers of Chloe are not fully defined.
Right.
Like she has this kind of, it's not a teleport ability, but it's like a
Telepathic, you mean?
well, she sees other people in her room or in her closet.
Mhm.
But in reality, it's Chloe going to them.
Right.
So it's like but she's not physically there. I guess she's just telepathically
I think
there.
it's like an astral projection type thing is how I interpreted it.
There's that, and then she has the ability to control people's minds and force them to do things. And she can at the beginning, she has to like say it out loud before it happens, and then eventually it's like, nope, now I'm just gonna look at you. And the agent at the front doorstep with the redheaded neighbor, and he stabs her in the eye. You're just watching it and you're like, oh my God, she's done it. And then the gun comes up to the guy's head and, it pulls away. But that same maneuver is paid off later in the movie. And it's rough. It's
It
rough.
is, yeah. Well, and then she eventually gets to the point where she doesn't even have to look at the person. Like when she controls that guy at Matic Mountain, she's able to do that, completely from a distance.
That was pretty cute and funny to see that big low oaf say,
Yeah.
It's okay, mommy. I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you out of here, mommy.
But yeah, and talking about that scene with the ADF agent too. And I found myself watching those scenes, and I'm just like, the first time when we see Grace Park's character in that interview, and she's saying that, I agree with, she's she's trying
to relocation and termination.
Right. When she says that so casually, and you're just like, wait, let's just back up a second. You're talking about termination, and you in the moment you're like, that is fucking terrifying. But then you see what Chloe's doing, and you're just like, I don't know.
Yeah, it turns into a thing. It's almost like there's this huge debate about do you take, if a person is born with as a sexual deviant, is is a child predator,
Right.
and they're born that way. It's not their fault they're born that way, but you can't have that person in your society.
Right.
It's like putting down a rabid dog almost at that point. And in this situation, it's like, yeah, it's a rabid dog that could literally destroy an entire city in a heartbeat, but they're still human.
Yeah.
So another interesting fact about the production of the movie is the two filmmakers, they were writing this in 2016, right when Trump had just been elected to office, and there was a lot of like a focus on immigrants and taking away people's rights, and a lot of talk about what happens next with this. And the writers, they were firmly grounding this in an alternate reality, and they realized that it was becoming more and more like a reality.
Yeah.
And they're like, these people are being targeted for nothing that they've personally done, and they're just trying to live a better life. And that's the same thing with these freaks, with these abnormals, as she calls them. So the other fun fact about the production is that when Emil Hirsch signed on, he was only signed on for like he only agreed to do it 5 days before they started production, before they started rolling.
Oh wow.
And he was like, why is nobody cast for this? This script is great. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And he had just had his first child. So he was fresh off of his first child, and this emotional resonance with the character Chloe really landed for him, which I think helped seal the deal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I read somewhere in the research for this episode that he had just become a dad before he made this, and I totally get that. Like even just my second child just being born yesterday when I watched this movie, and it's just like So I was like in the perfect spot to watch this movie because I, just had a kid, just had a second kid, and just like having that experience, it's just, I liken it a lot to Man of Steel, Jonathan Kent's reaction. And, now I criticize that movie because it's a different kind of story. Like Jonathan Kent, the whole purpose is he's supposed to be better than all of us. So when you have Kevin Costner as Jonathan Kent saying like, oh, no, hide who you are, don't, telling that to Superman, that's kind of like it's the antithesis of what that character is supposed to do. Sure. Whereas, but it's still at the same time, just looking at it from father's perspective, I get it. And I totally get what Emil Hirsch's character is doing here, what Henry is doing in this movie, and why he's going to these extreme lengths. Because I found myself thinking, I'm like, well, if that was my daughter, what would I be doing?
Yeah. I think the only thing that didn't make sense as far as character motivation for me in this was that he would have the opportunity, like I wouldn't stay in that same spot for a year at a time. You have the ability to time bubble and you could travel basically unnoticed to another squatter's house or another spot or a safe house or somebody that or just in the wilderness or whatever. You could take all the time you want to build a nice tree house and get all the food you want, and it's like you shouldn't have that much exposure if you have a power like that. Then you don't have to be in the middle of a city having a time bubble for 24 hours a day, draining you of all your energy and basically putting you on the edge of sleep deprivation for your entire life.
Right, exactly.
Well, what's the end game for her? Keep her there forever?
Yeah. I also I wasn't quite sure of like how the time bubble actually worked, because I wasn't quite sure if they were saying, because I read on Wikipedia, they said that he was slowing time outside the house, which, as opposed to, I think it would have made more sense if he was accelerating time inside the house. So I found that to be a little bit confusing.
I think the easy explanation is that it slows down time outside of the bubble, but I don't think that would be possible, because that would be literally the entire world.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, that seems like a massive feat of power.
No.
Yeah.
You would have to basically accelerate everything inside, so you essentially turn into a temporary version of like the Flash.
Right.
Which that leads to its own questions. Does the Flash have a short lifespan?
I thought it actually made more sense too, because like when he's reading the picture books to her and stuff like that, and talking about like A is for Apple and all that, I'm just like, wait a minute, she's 7 years old. This seems a little bit below her where she should be. But if he's accelerating time within the bubble, it makes a lot more sense that way.
Yeah. I mean, that is an interesting aspect of it. The first time that Chloe sees her mom in that astral projection, the mom doesn't recognize her, because in her mind it's been 6 months. So the baby's a 6-month-old baby,
right,
or a 9-month-old baby, or however long it's been, and she's now 7 years old, and she's like, "Holy shit, that's my daughter!"
Yeah,
it takes her a second to realize it, but once she gets there, it's like, okay, now it's almost like that, like old the M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Right. Well, talking about how they also, play with your perception of what's going on, because I was sitting there thinking like, wait, is the mother talking to her from the past? Like I was, that was kind of what my thinking was
I
going
thought
to.
that
Like
the first time too. Yeah.
and yeah, so I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of play around with that. Also, Bruce Dern in this movie, I thought he's another one who did a really good job in,
Yeah.
because right from the start, I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, that's the bad guy. But then as
Me
it
too.
goes on, it's just like slowly a little bit more you're being revealed. I'm like, wait, maybe he's not the bad guy. And I found myself really kind of going back and forth and questioning that.
Yeah, I tried to put myself in the mind frame of the first time I watched it, because I watched it with my girlfriend. It was just a blind watch, and I don't even know where I found this. I had to have been a movie podcast. I listen to like way too many movie podcasts, so my movie watch list is constantly growing and very rarely shrinking. So
Yeah, I know that's like
I picked it up and watched it, and I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, this creep. Oh, she's in the ice cream truck with a creep, and that's it for her. She's gone. She's going to be murdered by this old man, and it's way more complicated than that. And
Yeah.
the movie, the way it unravels slowly over the course, it's almost like you don't even get most of the story until the beginning of the third act. So I that's the criticism that I understand for, I like the movie that I really enjoy, that I'm like, how could you not like this? I like to read the bad reviews. And this has got about 86 to 88% on Rotten Tomatoes between both
Right.
categories. And I popped into the bad reviews section, and most of them are essentially just saying, out with it. Tell us the story. Why, it takes half the movie just to get into it, which I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, normally I would be sympathetic to those reviews in most cases, but here's the thing: it does take a while for the story to unravel, but it never feels like it's wasting your time, though. So I didn't mind that. I didn't mind that mystery and like that, because it kept me engaged the whole time. Like, it's one thing if you're watching a movie and it's just like, oh, for fuck's sake, get on with it already. But I never felt that at all in this movie.
Yeah, I think the characters are compelling enough to where even if there is no supernatural aspect to it and you don't see that reveal, you still are happy to see Chloe and her dad getting, figuring out their shit together. So I like that, and it doesn't take very long until you get the creepy antagonist, the red herring antagonist of Bruce Dern, where you're like, I mean, there's just enough interesting stuff that happens. You don't go 5 minutes before you get the neighbor girl forcing the neighbor girl to come over and give the ice cream. And then you get Bruce Dern and you see him and you're like, ooh, that guy's creepy. And then she's upstairs and the neighbor girl's in the closet and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Every 5 minutes you get something more to entice you to keep watching. And
well, like the slumber party thing, I thought that was a nightmare she was having or something.
Yeah, me too.
And then later you find out, no, she was at my slumber party. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. At first I thought she was teleporting. She was doing like the Outer Limits thing where the kid, grabs the screen and, brings whatever it is to him. And I thought that's what it was. She was teleporting her neighbor into her closet with her. And then it was the opposite. She's astral projecting into her room.
Yeah.
But the rules of that are a little bit loosey-goosey. Sometimes the person in the room can see her. Sometimes they can't.
Right.
Which is fine. It doesn't have to be 100% fleshed out. It's like, oh, this is cool. This is cool enough. But it's if those characters you didn't care about and there was just some bratty girl and it was just some guy who was, I don't know, you just didn't, if they couldn't pull off those performances, then yeah, that first half of the movie might feel like a slog, but I was bought in from the beginning.
I was too. Yeah. I had no problem with that slow reveal over time because the characters were so engaging. And like, talking about, expectations going into this movie, if you hadn't recommended it for this podcast and I just started watching this cold, I wouldn't even predict a sci-fi or supernatural angle at all in the beginning of it, because it just seems like this is just some paranoid guy who's like overprotective of his daughter.
Oh yeah, for sure. Once you see that reveal, I mean, even after that weird the shockwave or the time bubble, which you find out later is time bubble, even after you see that for the first time, you're like, wait a second. Nah, this is not a supernatural. What was that? Yeah. And then once that is coupled with the kind of mind control that she's got, coupled with the trip to the park with Bruce Dern,
Mhm.
that's when it really starts turning into, okay, so something's here.
Yeah, yeah,
now,
yeah.
now we're in a pure fiction in an alternate reality world, which
Right.
that's some of my favorite science fiction is like near future or even sci-fi present, like
Mhm.
District 9.
Mhm.
So cool. You're just like, this is modern day Johannesburg,
Right.
and all this shit is going down, and you're just here to watch it, and it's set within a reality that we all understand, and that's what makes it feel even more strange. Is like an alien in the year 10,000 AD on a
Mhm.
spacecraft somewhere on another planet. It doesn't feel as strange as an alien that's in, Chicago
Right.
running amok.
Yeah. Something else too. And there are two things I want to touch on with that. First off, the time bubble powers is like, I do like that they keep that reveal of what they actually are, because if I found myself thinking, knowing it's a sci-fi movie with superpowers, like I'm thinking like, oh, is he just, does the reason he have to stay awake all the time because he's got like some sort of protective field around the house, or he's making the house,
Invisible or something.
or something like that? Yeah, because every time he wakes up, you see the bubble expand. That was my thought for a while, and why he felt like you have to be safe inside the house.
Yeah.
So the reveal that it was a time bubble actually was interesting. I also, it did make me question too, what was the purpose of accelerating time inside, if we're going with that interpretation of it?
Yeah.
Or even if you're using the interpretation of slowing down time outside, like it did make me wonder, like you were mentioned before, what's his ultimate end game? What's he trying to do? Is he just trying to age her up until the point where
Oh, that's
she can,
interesting. Maybe
yeah, so that was something I was wondering
she can
about
take
myself.
care of herself, and
Right,
she's not so vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it that way. One of the best things about this universe being lived in as it is,
Mhm.
it reminds me of The Boys, where they're like, let's take what would actually happen with a person. Have you seen The Boys?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay,
the first two
so-
seasons. I haven't seen the latest season yet.
Got it. So, what happens if someone traveling at 10,000 miles an hour happens to shoulder check someone,
Right.
in the first episode? And let's expand on that. What cool things can a person that's backed into a corner where your daughter is literally about to be exterminated by the government, can this guy do with this interesting time bubble?
Mhm.
The final showdown with the SWAT team outside of their house, where he slows down time and shoots the three of them through the
Mhm.
bubble. That was great.
Yeah.
That was like, oh shit, that's a great use of that interesting power. And it's like having a creative mind to be able to say, an invisible person can do only so many things.
Mhm.
But what other cool things can you do with these weird powers of
Right.
time slowing or astral projection or mind control? It's pretty cool. The other thing that I really like about how the story landed is that the idea of ultimate power in a child is terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's been explored a few different ways. They did it with Chronicle,
Mhm.
but they were teenagers. And then there was a movie most recently that was
Brightburn.
I haven't seen Brightburn.
Okay,
No.
Brightburn did it. Brightburn was really good.
It was
Exploration of that
basically
tech.
what if Superman, when he got his powers, was
Right.
that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Was that good?
Oh yeah, it was really good. That was
Okay.
really good. In fact, we covered that I think like maybe 2 years ago or so on the show. So
okay.
it was a really good movie. I was really impressed. In fact, my late co-host, he had a theory that you could put Brightburn and Chronicle in the same universe.
Oh, interesting.
And I would actually add that you could probably, you could probably actually use those as kind of like a prequel to Freaks. Actually, like you could actually work Freaks into that too, I think.
Yeah. I could see it. And I was really excited about that, mainly because it was Sean Gunn
Mhm.
that directed that. And I don't know why I never watched it. It just came and went. And I don't know if it just got bad reviews at the time or something, and I just skipped it. But
Well, I think that also came out like right around COVID time. So I think that was it was 2019. Yeah. So it was like the end of 2019 is when it came out. And I think that was just when COVID was kind of getting started. But it wasn't, it was actually, so James Gunn produced it. But Mark Gunn and Brian Gunn wrote it. And then it was David Yarovesky was the director.
I thought for the whole time I thought Sean Gunn
No.
directed it, but I guess it wasn't even Sean Gunn. It was Mark and Brian Gunn.
Yeah.
They're also brothers of James.
It doesn't. I imagine so. Just
Well,
based on, because otherwise that's a really weird coincidence.
yeah. Well, either way, that movie would fit in there with Chronicle, but there's also another one called The Innocents, which came out.
Oh, so
last year.
they're James Gunn's cousin, actually.
Oh, okay, cool, got it. But yeah, the writer and director of The Worst Person in the World, that was nominated for Best Foreign Picture this last year at the Oscars.
Mhm.
That person wrote a couple of cool sci-fi almost horror movies, one called Thelma a few years back, and then one called The Innocents, which came out last year, I think. And or I might have that backwards, but that explores the idea of same thing. These kids, but they're very young. Like one of them might be as young as like 5 years old, and then there's one that's as old as 10, I think. And they're all coming into their powers at a young age, and all the emotional rawness that comes with a young age, where it's like, oh, you took my toy. If I could kill you, I might, because I'm 7 years old. And what happens when you give those powers to those kids? So this does the same thing. She's not all powerful, but once mom comes out of prison, that's going to be a hell of a duo.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you should definitely watch Brightburn then, because it really did explore that idea. And the kid in that is basically all powerful. So
I'm adding that to the list right now.
that's it's worth a watch. And one of the cool things about, and I think I do want to see more of that, like exploring the superhero aspect in horror films is such an interesting concept. And I thought Brightburn did a really good job with it. I thought this movie did a really good job with it. Chronicle to a lesser extent. I didn't think it was. I don't think it quite pushed it as far as they could have in Chronicle, but it was a nice attempt. But yeah, I like this idea of like using the superhero concept and trying to find different things to do with it. But also one of the things I really liked about this is, and this goes back to what you were saying before, like comparing it to what, the kind of shit Trump's doing and all that, and like the demonization of immigrants.
Yeah.
I feel like it's different because the demonization of immigrants and all that, it's completely rooted in unreality. It's all about scapegoating. It's
sure,
but the fear about the abnormals is real. And I think that's an interesting concept when you think about like the X-Men movies or the comics or anything like that. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the X-Men movies.
I watched the animated series, was kind of a staple for me, so I caught enough of it.
So yeah, you know all you need to know.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things about the X-Men is like the whole idea of mutant registration, which was the big thing in the first movie, and the idea of like, you watch that first movie and that speech Senator Kelly's giving when he says, he's like, well, here's a girl who can walk through walls. What's to stop her from walking into a bank vault or into anyone else's house? And I thought, I'm like, on the one hand, the way the movies, the way the comics, the way the TV shows present it, yeah, that's terrible. You're labeling people as, you're judging people whether or not they get the ability to have rights, basically based on what they're born with.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it's one thing being born with a different skin pigmentation or being born of a different sexual orientation or sexual identity or anything like that. It's another thing when you can blow up houses by looking at them.
Yeah.
And I think this movie did and I do find and I've always said, like, when I watch the X-Men movies and all that, it's an allegory, it's in a fantasy world, and you're not really supposed to think about that. But in reality, if mutants existed, I'd kind of want the government to know what's going on.
Yeah, it is a slippery slope, because it's not a 1-for-1 comparison.
Right.
It's not because I know the X-Men, it's an allegory for, like the Holocaust and the registration, all that. I mean, clearly Magneto is shown in a concentration camp in the movies, but
yeah, and in the comics, right, they really leaned heavily into the civil rights movement as an allegory for it as well. And then in the 90s, as LGBTQ issues became more prominent, it started to become more of an allegory for that as well. And it's always kind of served as that kind of like stand-in for marginalized groups in general. But that was something that always made me think, because you
can't compare apples to apples, though, because a person from Mexico or Ecuador can't fly and
Exactly.
explode
Exactly.
everyone around them with a shockwave like the mom does.
Exactly. And I think it's also interesting when you think about it with like the gun control debate, where it's like, okay, well, if people are going to have guns, you know, we kind of want them to be licensed and be trained and all that, or they don't get them at all. And so it's a really interesting concept you're talking about, and it's worth exploring. And I don't think the comics or any of the X-Men movies have really explored in this kind of depth as much, which this movie does kind of start to hint at, where it's like, what happens when the person themselves is the gun?
Yeah, that's probably a closer comparison. Is like having someone with a musket versus having someone with a 50 round capacity, you know, high speed assault rifle that can pop into a clip in and second they reach the end of the clip. It's like that now that person holds the power, and what can we do to stop that person if they were choose to use their power?
Right. Well, especially and especially when you look at things like what happened in Uvalde, where the cops were too afraid to go in, so they stayed outside because the guy had a weapon that was too powerful for them to face.
Yeah, and they had bullets, mister.
Yeah. And so it is an interesting idea. And I think that's, and you see, and I like that this movie doesn't pull its punches with that, where it shows that, okay, on the one hand, you're looking at this world through Chloe's eyes, and you're seeing what these types of laws and stuff are pushing the lengths to her family to go through. You see that they're torturing her mother and all that. And yeah, that's monstrous. But at the same time, you also see what she can do when she's unchecked, and you're just kind of like, okay, there's no side is completely right here. There's some arguments on both sides here that make sense.
Yeah, just like the intro to, I want to say it was Return of the Jedi. It says there are heroes on both sides. It's like in your mind, if you're on the abnormal side or the freak side, it's like we can't let them do that to us. So it almost turns into an invincible sort of thing with the Viltrumites.
Right.
It's like now we are the superior, you know, species or whatever. We are the superior mutants, freaks. So, you know, what's to stop us? And I really think that Chloe and her mom are probably going to destroy most of humanity.
Oh yeah, I mean, like the way that movie ends, like it's not necessarily a happy ending. Like, I watched that ending and I'm just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Things about to get
good
bad.
Thing this is not a true story.
Yeah. Brightburn also has a similar kind of ending to that, where at the end you're just like, oh shit, this is not good. And and I do like that. As much as I love superheroes, it is really cool to kind of see this kind of like alternate take on. And I think The Boys does a really good job of this too, where it shows, you know, just like that kind of. And I think this reminds me of the phrase, like it's not that power corrupts, it's that power reveals. And I think that's really, and so if you're a corrupt person to begin with, power is just going to make you more corrupt, where, and I think and I think you can see that in stuff like The Boys, or even if you draw comparisons, because you do wonder how much is Chloe's reactions to things a result of the way she's been raised.
Absolutely. Which came first? Chicken or the egg?
Exactly. Right. And you find yourself wondering, well, okay, on the one hand, I understand why Henry is trying to keep her locked up like this. But on the other hand, has he actually made things worse by doing this thing that he thought was going to protect her?
Yep. Yeah, it's like it's Titan. I think that's a character's name from Megamind. Jonah Hill's character, the news reporter, cameraman. That
I never actually saw it, but
it's very fun.
Sure. Okay.
Very fun. Yeah, he's basically almost an incel that gets you know, superpowers, and then instantly it's supposed to be this new Superman to help everybody. He goes, you know what? I'm just gonna be a bad guy. Just enslaves humanity of that town.
Yeah, I like this, and this is why probably more than like I want to see more about this universe and like what kind of stuff they play with, even if they never touch Chloe and her mom again. Just like,
yeah, that's fine.
Seeing the rest of this world, there's so much stuff to play with, especially when they talk about, and like you said, this world is so well lived in. They've got this intriguing backstory about like what happened in Dallas and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of little breadcrumbs that you're given, and you're like, I want to know more about that.
Yeah,
and you know, Taika Waititi is helming the new Star Wars movie, and he's commented already that he's going to leave all the previous characters behind. It's just going to be a new movie with new people, a new storyline, just set in that universe. And whenever somebody asks me, you know, you get these prompts on Twitter, and it's like, what would you rather have, this or that? Which is a better movie, Citizen Kane or Casablanca, or whatever. All these little one, would you rather,
Mhm.
this and that. And one of them that I see a lot is like, what movie that never got a sequel do you want to see get a sequel? And my answer is always this movie, because
Yes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it doesn't have to be a sequel, like you said. It could be like a Poirot thing where it's just there's one constant character. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe Bruce Dern comes back. Oh, well,
Mhm.
maybe he can't come back. But you're in that universe, and it's the ADF, and there's Modak Mountain or Madoc Mountain.
Madoc Mountain, yeah.
Yeah, Madoc Mountain. I keep wanting to say Modoc because that's a county in California, Modoc County. But,
Modoc's also a Marvel character as well.
oh, is it really?
Yeah, they got a Hulu series.
Oh, is it the one with
Patton
Patton
Oswalt?
Oswalt?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say it's spelled almost the same, just with an extra D or something like that. But yeah, I really would like to see it, and I can't overstate enough how good the character of Chloe was, and I got to look up her actress again, just because I completely forgot her name, and I looked to see if she had any recent credits, and she doesn't.
Yeah, Lexi Colker.
That's it, Lexi Colker. Cannot overstate how well she did.
Yes,
The emotions was great.
Apparently she was on Agents of Shield as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's only been like one or two projects since then, but I really wouldn't be surprised if she grows up and comes back as a young adult and starts doing stuff kind of like Dakota Fanning, and is in some really interesting projects, because she killed it. And then on top of it, for such a small production, the writer director team absolutely nailed it. And
Absolutely, yeah.
it's when you think about these Hollywood movies out there, a lot of people are like, well, how are we going to make a movie? Well, I need millions of dollars to do that. Well, you don't really. You have to take what you have and decide, can I make a movie with this? And they were already working on a it was I want to say it was a Disney Channel production, it was about like some sort of a mech warrior or something like that. It's called Mech X4. Had 2 seasons. It was kind of this supernatural sort of almost like a Transformers sort of cross with Voltron, and for young kids. And the series was done, and they talked to the production team, and they said, well, what are you going to do with all these set pieces? What are you going to do with this truck that we played that was the food truck in the show? And they said, oh, we're just going to scrap it all. We're going to take this to landfill and take that to the dump, and you guys want it? And they're like, heck yeah. So they just grabbed all the stuff that was going to go in the garbage anyways, and they're like, okay, we can use this as the Madoc Mountain. We can use this set as whatever inside interior of the house, and just dress it up and stuff like that. And we'll take the truck that barely runs, and we'll tune it up, and all our friends can get together and paint the outside, and we'll get somebody to choreograph or compose a new creepy ice cream truck song. And there we go. There's half of our set. Now we just got to get talent to fill it, make something great, put it in front of the right people, make the characters interesting, and now you got a project, and you don't have to spend $10 million of somebody else's money to do it.
Right. Well, I remember too, when, with my friends making like a short movie, we had a short film that had to be set in a warehouse. We don't have access to a warehouse, but what we did was we had a friend's garage where we just kind of threw some boxes and some planks of wood in the background, and just made it look enough like it for the shots we were doing. And then that was all we needed to do. Another scene, we had to film it at a grave site. So obviously we can't go to a real cemetery to film it. There's all sorts, you got to get permits, you got to get all sorts of stuff like that. But, there's this open field that nobody's at, near my house. We can, if we frame it a certain way, we can make it look like, oh, maybe that's kind of a gravestone there. And then that's all you need to do. But yeah. And, again, this movie, like you said, the budget, and I'm just looking it up on IMDb. It says that the estimated budget is $2,000. So
it's insane.
It's nothing. It's nothing. I mean, Jesus Christ, $2,000. That's like, if you think about a Marvel movie, that's like the fucking coffee budget. I mean, what?
Yeah. If that's a week's worth of coffee. No, it is very cool. And I mean, I know that a lot of it, my dad, he's somebody I really idolized quite a bit and still do. And he used to tell me all the time, it's not what you know till you know. And he would do nice favors for people all the time. He would do stuff and help people out with things and fix people's cars and, do this, do that. If he could, he would. And when it came time for it, he's like, I have a list a mile long of people that owe me favors. And I lived most of my life that way. And I remember when I was a kid, he built onto our house that I grew up in, and he built I want to say 400 square feet onto just his master bath bedroom, which cracks me up. The whole house was unchanged except for his bedroom, my mom's bedroom. But they had to pour concrete for the slab. They had to reframe the house, run electrical, do drywall, do spackle, roof it, tile it, paint stucco the outside, paint the outside, set windows, build retaining walls on the, or like load bearing walls on the inside. And I'm like, how are you going to do all this, Dad? I was like 10 years old. And he goes, I know a guy that does concrete. He owes me a favor. I know a guy that does framing. He owes me a favor. Yeah, I know a roofer. He owes me a favor. And it literally was just him and his friends over the course of about a month building this addition to the house. And I was like, that was cool, you know? And that's how the filmmakers made this. They had a lot of people they worked with over the years on other projects that knew them and knew they were good guys. And they're like, yeah, you helped me out with that one editing thing. So yeah, I'll do this for you. And ultimately, I mean, that's how you finish the project. You just pull in your favors and make something interesting, and people will jump on board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this reminds me of something Kevin Smith said when he's talking about, when he was making Clerks and all that, and he tells people, whatever you want to do, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a movie, whether it's a book, a comic, like just fucking do it. Like, don't wait for permission, just do it. I think these guys really took that kind of, I don't know if they necessarily heard that advice specifically, but that concept, they definitely, lived through it. And I didn't know that about, that they were working on this thing. They were able to get all access to all this stuff, but that's, Jesus, yeah, just fucking dumpster dive near a movie studio. You never know what you might find.
Absolutely. There's times just throughout my daily life where I'm like, at my shop, we have these special gloves that are made for disconnecting high-powered hybrid electric systems, and they're only good for 6 months. Once you crack the seal, you have to get them certified every 6 months, and it's cheaper to buy a new set than to certify them. So we get these cool, giant, thick rubber gloves that look like mad scientist gloves. And instead of throwing them in the garbage, I took them home, and I'm like, maybe we'll make something with this one day.
Right.
And it's like you're in the thrift store and you see something funky old VCR. You're like, that would be so cool. We could build an entire period piece around this and that and whatever, and buy this cheap TV for $50 and this VCR for $20, whether it works or not. And you can have potentially have a corner of your set for a short that you want to make. So it's like, as long as you're creative and you're there, and especially if you have a love for film and you're like, if I were to make something, I want to make it like this. Or I see something in my life and this is something I feel like I can do with the resources that I have, just go do it.
Yeah.
And if it leads to something cool and people notice and they're like, maybe then somebody would be like, hey, that guy's pretty interesting. And that team of people, they can't seem to know what they're doing. Let's give them some money to do it. And then it's like, now you're making money doing what you love. Great.
Yeah. I mean, well, again, Kevin Smith's a perfect example of that. He makes Clerk on it after he sells his comic book collection. He maxes out his credit cards to make Clerks. And then, basically now he just gets to, make podcasts for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Rocket ship to the moon.
Yeah. He just makes his living talking about stuff he loves. I mean, that's the fucking dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, Pete, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a nice conversation, and thanks for introducing me to this movie. I was really impressed with how much I enjoyed it.
Good. That makes me happy. It's one of the movies that I'll usually spout out if someone's like, hey, give me some underrated gem that most people haven't heard of. It's usually this and The Kid Detective, but this fits the genre.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Well, thanks for coming on. And so why don't you tell people where they can find you again?
So you're in the podcast player listening to this as we speak. Back out, go to the search bar, type in Middle Class Film Class. You'll see our logo pop up. It's all black and white logo with silhouettes of 3 of our heads. Really easy to find, and just hit subscribe and give us a couple of episodes because there's twice a week. So the first episode is more conversational. It's gab and chatter. It's more fun and free, more frivolous. And the second episode is more structured, and we just do a deep dive review into one movie. So go back to our old catalog, look at some movies that you like, or some movie you've never heard of before, and maybe you'll find something interesting to pick out for this week's viewing material. And if you're a podcast regular, we constantly will read almost every email that a listener sends in, listener picks. We even just recently had one of our regular listeners. None of the 3 of us had gone to see the new Jurassic Park. But listener Chris did, and he was pretty toasted when he did it. So he wrote a junk review into us, which was fantastic, and we read it on air. And it may be a regular segment now. So yeah, give it a shot. It's called Middle Class Film Class. You'll have a good time.
Okay, and we'll have links to that in the show notes too, so you can check those out as well. But that does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. SuperheroCinephiles.com is the website. Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And remember, if you subscribe to the Patreon at any level, you get extra episodes with the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club companion show where we talk about comic book reviews. And also you get these regular episodes a week in advance. So you can do that at patreon.com/supercinemapod. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time. If you enjoy the Superhero Cinephiles, then you'll also love my companion podcast, the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. All my Patreon subscribers get access to this exclusive podcast where I review superhero comics and graphic novels. Not sure what comics you want to read next or what you should dive into? I've got you covered on that. I'll be doing reviews, recommendations, and also talking to you about useful entry points if you're interested in reading some comics but don't know where you should start. Plus, you'll get access to all episodes of the main show a week before everyone else. On all of this for as little as just $1 a month. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/supercinemapod and you can sign up at any subscription amount to get started. Thanks so much for your support, and please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.